Hey everyone, we are back for week 4 of AP Lit Vocab, and the words this week are all still related to stories. All of them can apply to short stories, most of them can apply to novels, but sort of some more terms kind of related to stories. So let's get right into things without delay, and hopefully can get you going here. There we go. So that's actually our second one. Let me go back here. Here we go. Now we're at the beginning. Our first word is going to be related to setting, which I know has been killed and drilled into your head a million times. Setting, where and when the story takes place. I actually chose this graphic to put on here because I love the fact that they have other elements that often make up setting, like the historical era or historical moment in time, obviously geographical place, time, like time of day is a part of setting, the climate or the weather, the environment kind of surrounding a character, social conditions can actually play into setting, and then things like, obvious things like day, month, year, all of those as well. So setting, a lot of different elements there that make that up. Next up is kind of a fun word. It's called verisimilitude. Verisimilitude. And broken down, this word, if you kind of look in the center here, you might see part of the word similar. And this word means similar to the truth. So to say that a work has verisimilitude is it's realistic, it's believable. So things typically like in the fantasy genre wouldn't have verisimilitude because works that would be described in this way could kind of come off the paper and actually happen in real life. Next up, mood or atmosphere. We've already talked about this word in class, but atmosphere, first of all, is just another term for mood. Sometimes it's written one way, sometimes it's written the other. And remember that mood is about the reader. So the feeling the writer is creating for you as the reader. Thinking about, how does the passage make you feel? How does the story make you feel? And often there's not just one mood throughout the story. We talked about the idea of having a shift that can occur. Here's the little example, mood bananas, different feelings you could have, right, based on that passage. Things like the details that are included, things like the diction the writer uses help create mood in you for you as the reader. Next up is narrative pace. So narrative pace is the rate at which the story moves. It's the rate at which the story moves. Now, this is completely different from how quickly events are happening. Okay, that is something absolutely different than what we're talking about here. So we're talking more about, with narrative pace, wow, and I have actually, I made my slide wrong, so ignore the stuff at the bottom. Okay, that's going to go with our next slide, and I'll go back and forth here so we can get there. But narrative pace has to do with things like punctuation. It has to do with word choice and sentence length. So if a writer is writing really long, drawn-out, ornate sentences, it can feel like the story is moving slower than if maybe they're using sort of some staccato sentences. It can feel like things are moving quicker in the story. So it's not about the action, but it's really based on writing style. And our next word is style, and I think I just literally had a brain fart, you guys. So style is here, but I'm going to go back because what I put at the bottom of here should go in style, okay? So style is really the voice of the writer, and there are many, many things that contribute to style. So things like the length of the sentences contributes to style. The word choice, the diction contributes to style. The use of imagery or figurative language can all contribute to style. So These are just some descriptors of style. This is not the be-all, end-all list, but we can describe style as informal or formal. Saying something like my boss versus my superior kind of changes the way that you might view that. Informal boss, formal superior. Your style could be authoritative, right? Commanding and knowing. It could be emotive, which simply means that it evokes emotion. A writer's style could be didactic. It's kind of preachy or insistent. Objective, meaning, without judgment. Ornate, it's kind of flowery and pretentious. Plain, kind of simple, straightforward to the point. Scholarly, maybe learned and even authoritative. Scholarly could kind of go with authoritative. Scientific, right, kind of precise, relying on the language of science. So these are just some ideas of words that could describe an author's style, but it's going to be dependent on the words that they're using, their sentences, the imagery, figurative language, all of that helps determine style. Again, sorry about the little oopsie here with the back and forth. So then we're going to tone, another word that we've addressed in class. This is the attitude of the author toward a subject. And so less about word choice and more about how things are said, kind of as in this little bubble says here. Diction can come in when we're talking about tone, the words, but it's usually in how those words are said or how those words are written or stated. The tone can be stated. An author could kind of state their feelings outright, or more often it can be implied. And so you have to kind of look at how those words and sentences are structured in order to figure out how they feel about it. We're going to do a lot more work with tone and mood and diction, especially when we get into poetry is a really good place to do that. But this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg. A question to kind of ask yourself for tone is, how does the author feel about what he or she is writing? And then how do I know that? What tells me that? Diction. I love this one, but this is one that people often kind of, the train can derail when it comes to diction. Never tell me an author uses diction. Never tell me an author uses diction. Of course the author uses diction. They're using words. That is, that's a huge, huge no-no. But diction, when it comes down to it, is simply the author's choice of the words, the way they're arranged within the text. Again, they could use formal diction, they could use informal diction, they could use common terms, they could use really technical terms, and we're going to talk about a couple different descriptors of diction coming up. We're going to talk about abstract and concrete diction, and then denotation and connotation, which all have to do with diction. I like this little graphic because it sort of illustrates how important word choice is for what you mean, and kind of the visuals that play into people's heads. So abstract diction and concrete diction are a couple of descriptors that you could use to talk about diction. So let's start actually with concrete diction. I'm going to skip ahead for just a moment. So concrete diction describes qualities that you can perceive with your senses. Okay? It's language that describes qualities you can perceive with your senses, right? If you're eating a apple and you say the fruit is sweet, sweet is something you can experience with your senses, right? Or you say something is cool to the touch, you can experience that with your senses. However, abstract diction then is language that describes qualities that cannot be perceived with your senses, right? If I say the apple is nice or the apple is beautiful, those are very abstract and they're subjective, because what you think is beautiful or what you think is nice may be very different from what I think is beautiful or what I think is nice. A couple other examples kind of back and forth here. Books would be concrete. Education is abstract. A jail cell would be concrete. Justice would be abstract. Declaration of Independence is concrete. Freedom is abstract. Denotation and connotation are two more words related to diction, and we're going to get into these a lot more when we get, again, especially get into poetry. These terms are so important. So denotation is the easy one to remember because dictionary starts with D, denotation starts with D. Denotation of a word is the dictionary definition of that word, right? So when you look up boat in the dictionary, it's whatever that says. That's our kind of agreed upon definition. However, connotation, your connotations are your associations, your feelings, the images that a word evokes in your own mind. So when I say boat, maybe you think about canoe. The next person over might think about yacht. Maybe the next person over, their mind goes to a time when they went sailing with their best friend. And that's what boat is evoking in their mind. So denotation, dictionary definition, right? It's really not arguable because it's kind of the agreed upon definition. But connotations are really personal because it's your associations, it's your images, it's your feelings about that word. Okay. I think, and again, here's another little example, right? Think about connotation of a word and four words that mean somewhat the same thing, but they have very different ideas that they're related to. In medias res is our next term, and this is a word that translates like many of our words. A lot of them are Greek or Latin in nature, and this is one that means in the middle of things. So if a story starts in medias res, it's starting somewhere in the middle of the story. And so oftentimes these stories establish characters, setting through flashback or through character conversations about the past itself. A couple advantages to starting stories in medias res. Movies do this all the time, right? You're kind of often thrown into the middle of the action versus it building up. And especially with the need we have these days to just be entertained by everything, so many movies jump right into the middle of the action. Finally, we have prologue. And prologue is actually also a Greek word, pro meaning before, and log meaning speech. So prologue literally means before speech. And a prologue typically precedes either the first chapter of a novel or the first act of a play. Most common, or one of the most famous prologues, is probably from Romeo and Juliet, which is on your screen, because the prologue actually gives away the play in this case. But the idea is that you would read then to find out the details and how things came to be. You read for the how versus reading for the what happens. Prologue is meant to prepare for the reader to prepare the reader for what is to come, if you want to go say it that way. Okay, and that takes us to the end of our words for the week. As always, bring questions on Tuesday and we will address those, or if you need more examples, whatever it is, and we'll see you then.